Hello, my friends. How are you doing today? I hope that every one of y'all are doing great. And today we're going to have a little bit different kind of video for you. I'm going to still speak softly and slowly. I don't have a microphone though. I tried to test my microphone in here and the acoustics are very weird and it sounded strange with my external mic, so I'm just opting not to use one at all. But I think that this sounds better from what I've tested. But I thought it would be interesting to talk to you a little bit about some hard things. And case in point, the hard thing of going through my father's estate and clearing out and cleaning up and throwing away and taking things to the thrift stores in the area. So if you are one who likes to just have me keep you company in the background, I would love for you to do that. I will be showing you some things this time, so if you're interested in seeing some of those things, you know, keep the screen open. But I know a lot of y'all enjoy just the sound of my voice keeping you company as you do work, and hopefully if that's what you're going to be doing today, just maybe I'll impart some sort of words of wisdom along the way that might help you too. But either way, please know that I am so glad that you are here and sincerely appreciate you. One last thing I want to tell you about too is that I fully intend on finishing up the Golden Name Day book with you. It's just the last couple of weeks have been very, very busy with my going back and forth to Tennessee. That's about a 4-hour, 15-minute drive each way. And so my time has been taken up with that. And I don't have the extra brain capacity to sit and film 2 videos per week as all of that's been going on. So I will get back to that. So I do appreciate y'all being here. But what I wanted to do is I'm going to tell you a couple of things first, and then I'm going to show you some things that you might find interesting. My father passed away on April the 29th, 2025. So it's been a full year now that he died. And so my brother has lived in the home that my father and mother lived in since 1997. My brother moved in about a year after my mother passed away, and he just stayed on. He helped my daddy pay bills, and he worked while my father was on disability because he'd had a massive heart attack the same day that my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and things just kind of fell downhill for him after that. And so my brother stayed on to help him. So with that said, in the will, the house and the estate, I guess, was split 50-50 between my brother and I. I have a home. I don't need another home. And my brother was making the mortgage payment anyway, and so I'm not going to take that away from him. I have a great relationship with my brother. I aim to keep it that way for life. And so I gave him my share of the estate. And so the estate is in probate right now. It's still going through all of that, but eventually the home will be my brother's, free and clear. And so all that to say, he was kind of waiting until probate was finished before we went in and really cleared things out. But it's only been about 6 months, maybe 7 months since we started that process, and it could take up to a year. So we just decided we're going to do it now rather than later. So shortly after my father died, we did go in and take out some things. We took out some of his clothes and some things like that. Not a whole lot though. And my father didn't have a huge amount of things, but he did have some collections, and he was extremely sentimental, just like I am and just like my children are too. And so he kept a lot of old things. And then also he was a collector of a few things, not a lot, but a few things. And one of those things were records. And because he was, I think many of you know, he was a radio broadcaster for many years. So he has a lot of albums and records and things like that. And he had a vast collection growing up, and it's been pared way down. And so my brother and I were able to go through that. He had a huge old magazine collection, of which I didn't realize. And then he collected interesting things, and I'm going to show you some of those interesting things too that he collected over the years. But one thing that I wanted to share with you is my brother and I, the first night I got there, worked for about 5 hours, just going through his computer room where he kept most of his mementos. And then the next day we worked 14 hours straight. The only time we sat was when we were in the truck hauling things off either to the dump or to the Knox area rescue ministries, which thankfully there was a division in Sevierville, because otherwise it would have been really difficult to try to go all the way to Knoxville to a thrift store to haul some of that stuff off. But what a job and what a task it was. I'm grateful that it was just my brother and myself, first of all, because we have a similar sense of humor, and there was no one else there to slow us down, no one else saying, oh, I want that, or I want to try to sell that. No. I was so grateful that it was only us, and we were able to plow through it. And then second of all, it was cathartic in a lot of ways too, because there were still a lot of things there that belonged to my mother, old letters that she and my mother had written to one another. My mother was only 16 when she met my father, and then married him when she was 18. And so I got a glimpse of the young girl that she once was, and then the complete overcomer that she became, because my mother was raised in a terrible, terrible situation. Just so traumatic, her young childhood. And she wanted to do better for her children, her family, and she did better for herself, because despite not even graduating high school, being kicked out of her home, she was pushed between homes, between her parents' homes because they were divorced, and having to raise her siblings until she got married. She went through it. She absolutely went through it. And so I was able to read some of the things. I couldn't stop and read much for long because it was too much. It hurt too much to sit and read it, but I did keep a lot of that stuff so that someday maybe I will be able to sit when I'm at a better place and sit and read through that information. But it also gave me a glimpse into who my father was, and I even wish that I had kept more than I did, but when you're pressed for time and it's someone else's memories and you have your own life to live, while it's good to be able to glance through it, it would take a lifetime for me to look through all of that stuff that he kept. And so we had to throw away a lot of it. That's the reason why I did come home with as much as I did, because a lot of those things, let me see if I can find an example right here. A lot of the things that I brought home weren't so much that I wanted to keep it. It was more that I wanted to dispose of it in a proper way. My brother lives in a neighborhood, and so they really enforce burn permits there. They enforce them out here too, where I live in the country, but those burn permits are more for big brush piles, not just a small burn can in your backyard, so I can freely incinerate things in my backyard in my burn can without having to get a permit for that. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to bring some of these back home so that I could freely incinerate them and get rid of those things so that they wouldn't go to a landfill, because you don't want some of those personal effects in a landfill. One of the things that I brought home was something that I found of his that was, I thought it was very sweet. What he would do, let me see if I can find how far back these went. 2006. And this was endearing to me because I have kept a calendar since 1987. I started keeping calendars since 1987. And so in 87, I was 14 years old. And I started keeping calendars then. I made my own in 1987, and then I started buying them afterwards. But a calendar was my diary when I was young. And so I kept a calendar every year, but then I physically kept the calendars. So there is a drawer in my bedroom that is heavy because it is full of calendars of 40 years, 39 years of memories. So, you know, of things when we moved, when we had children, when children were birthdays, you know, anniversary dates, just so many pieces of our lives were written on these calendars. And the reason that I keep them was because I wanted those to serve as diaries as to what we were doing during that time period. So I can go back and look and see what we were doing in 2013, you know, on this date, and just to make my mind recollect what was going on. I probably should make it easier for my children and make a one sheet instead of keeping all those calendars, because they're going to add up after some time. But this is kind of what my father did. And so he has these little papers that he printed out going back from January 2006 all the way to when he died. And I think some of the last ones were actually on, he may have started putting those somewhere else because I couldn't find all of them. But this goes back to January 2006. So this was before my mother even passed away. And all he did was he had a printout. He had a little file on his computer of current phone numbers, and he would make the date, and this says January 2006, and he loved snowmen, but of course he corresponded it typically to whatever month it was, what print artist graphic that he used. And he even wrote a found called Daryl Mayberry, and he put the phone number down there and his pager number. There was no cell phone back then. And then, but he hung this either on his refrigerator, or sometimes he put it in his car and took it with him, because it's hard to remember all those phone numbers. And it was helpful for him to have this so that he could get in touch with somebody quickly. And so it had, you know, his good friends' phone numbers. It had my mother's work phone number, my brother's cell phone, his sister's phone number, mine and my husband's address, and then our phone numbers and home phone numbers, and my OnStar phone number in my vehicle, all of his brothers and sisters, neighbors. Goodness, just everyone that he knew, anyone who was very important to be able to remember. And then he also had, if there was a number that he needed to write down, either he would write it on here, or I've seen my mother's handwriting on here as well, and she would write things down. And he even took it and ran it through another time because of places that he worked. He would write people's phone numbers down where he worked too, so that he could easily access their numbers. So seeing this was so endearing to me to see that, because this was his record. This was his close contact, his record kind of keeping of his life. during those years. And you can see here October, November 2008, he's got his pumpkin, and it says July and August, March and April, he's got a little flower decoration there. So again, it's endearing to me to see this, because it's a record of everything he was maybe doing during that time, and it's just sweet to be able to look back on that. He was a fastidious record keeper of different things. Like if he got a oil changed in his car, he would write it down. And I guess this is common of people from this time period, because now my daddy was born in 1950. My father-in-law was born in 1936, but my father-in-law sort of does the same thing. His was a little bit done differently, because my father-in-law would get a calendar from the bank every year, and he would tear one sheet off of the front of the calendar, and on the back of that calendar front page, he would write down when he changed the air filters in his house, when he cleaned the gutters, when he changed the oil in his car, when he sent birthday cards. He's been sending all of his kids and his kids' spouses and grandchildren birthday cards ever since I've known him. I've gotten a birthday card every year for 38 years, and he's always remembered. And so that's so endearing to me too. So it's just kind of I guess maybe a man's way of record keeping, but it's sweet. It's very sweet to see that. And he even wrote down, I can see here, he wrote down one of my best girlfriend's phone numbers on this one from 2009, because she lived down the road from my parents, and he wanted to remember her phone number in case he ever needed to get in touch with her. So that's very sweet. And I think too, the reason why he had written down her phone number, because now that I'm looking at this, November 5th, 2009, that is the year that my mother got very sick, and all of our lives were going to drastically change here at the middle of this month. And that's my mother's handwriting, as a matter of fact, right there. So I'm sure she wrote that phone number down on this paper as a reminder to give her a call. She was a close neighbor, and if they needed anything, she could be there quickly, because she was a good friend of mine, and she would have done anything for my parents. So, oh my goodness, we're 18 minutes in, and I'm not nearly done with all of this. So let's see where to go next. I'm going to show you something else. Okay. When I was 2 years old, my parents bought a home, and if you will refer back to the home tour video, I look like I've got something across my face here. It's just the reflection of a shadow. So anyway, back to the video here, Lindy. My parents bought a home in 1975. My parents bought their first home for $16,000. It was a very small home, perfect size though for a mother, father, 2 children. I think it had 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. And in that home tour video that I showed you a couple of weeks ago were some of the furniture that I currently have in my home was part of that old house they bought in 1975, and it was fully furnished. So I found these in their house, and I wanted to bring them back with me too. I don't know what pattern this is. Let's see if we can see a name on the back of this and see if it's a brand. It says, oh goodness, I'm not going to be able to read this. I'm going to need a magnifying glass, I think. Kingswood Kingswood is what, I'd say that that's probably the pattern name and not the company. But again, I can't, it says stainless Japan, Kingswood, but then there is something written before it, and I can't see what it says. But can you, yeah, you can see that. See that little pattern on that? This is the silverware that I grew up eating, the pattern that I grew up eating with as a child. Now, these pieces were extra fancy pieces, so I don't know what kind of knife this was. I don't think it was a butter knife because she had a whole drawer full of true butter knives. This was probably something like a little fancier knife. This was, you know, back in the 40s and 50s, probably the 30s too, they made this specialty silverware that a proper Southern housewife would know exactly what these things were used for. And so this right here, this was some sort of a serving spoon, but with the way it's shaped, it was probably special for, we'll call it maybe for scalloped potatoes. I have no idea. This was really interesting though. Look at what a tiny little ladle that is. Maybe it was a gravy ladle, a sauce ladle. I'm just not sure. But I wanted to bring these home with me because they were actually in a container out in their garage, and I didn't want it to go to the thrift store. And in a box that these were in, they were getting ready to go to a thrift store because there were other pieces in there that weren't old, and I did not want these to go, so I kept these. And so I'll put these back right here. And then I'll show you a few of these things. This is another thing that, again, very personal things that no one else is going to want. And truly, to try to keep my children from having to deal with this at a later date, I have a plan for it. And I'll just go ahead and tell you I'm going to incinerate it. And I know that might sound harsh, but if I don't take care of it, my children will have to. And let me say, it's not going to be my children. It's going to be my daughter, because my boys don't care. And that's fine. They don't have to care. They've gotten everything they want, but they're not going to care about this in particular. So, and please don't be sad as I'm telling you these sad things. I'm not feeling the sadness as I relate this to you. I want to show this to you because it is a little cathartic for me. So if you will bear with me while I show you these things, I would appreciate it. So my mother, maybe I'll tell this story someday to y'all, but she was misdiagnosed for about 6 months. And then when she finally got the diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, it was stage 4. And there really wasn't anything that they could do. They told us that there was, and they tried to do the Whipple procedure on her, but looking back, I don't have proof of this, but it was at a hospital in Tennessee that is a teaching hospital, and we thought we were in the very best hands there. Maybe we were, I don't know. But keep in mind, it is a university hospital, a teaching hospital. And it probably, the way I'm looking back at things in hindsight, it almost seems like it was a perfect teaching opportunity for the students instead of the best thing for my mother. And it almost feels like we were taken advantage of during that time. But all that to say, her death was hastened because they already knew she had stage 4 cancer, pancreatic cancer. We didn't know this. They opened her up to perform the Whipple procedure on her and then had to close her back up because she was so consumed with the cancer. It had spread to all of her organs. that surgery in which they opened her up, they had it was probably way too unnecessary. Also, the wound that they gave her, and that hastened her death, I have no doubt. And so that was very unfortunate. So from diagnosis to death, it was 2 months. So all that to say, that was a nightmare, because my father also had a massive heart attack and had to go a triple bypass the day that she was diagnosed. So we had my mother on one floor, my father on the second floor. I think it was the second and the 8th floor. My brother and I were there, and we thought we were going to lose both parents on the same day. And but it turns out my father made it through, and it was good, but she did not. But so anyway, at the end, when she was on hospice, we brought her home. I did not want her to die in the hospital, but an aunt very, very empathetically told me that, she told my husband that, you know, Connie is not going to die with the children in this house. Y'all have got to go back home. And so that was very smart of my aunt to know that. And so my husband and I and the 3 children went back home to let my mama get to work, to the process of dying, because she was somewhat of wanted to be alone when she did her busy work anyway. And people, I have learned, die the way they lived, and she needed to have peace and quiet to get her work done. And so she did. And so we left, and I went home, and I knew she was going to be passing away. So I got busy, and I made this book for her, like a little book for people to sign. And I'm not even going to read to you these quotations about mothers, because it'll make me cry, and we don't want to do that on this video. But people went in and they signed their names and their addresses so that I could send them thank you cards. And then I have a picture of my parents here, and I wrote little quotes and again, sweet little things about mothers. And some people would write in where they were from. It says Helix Hair Academy. She would go get her hair done. So my mother was dearly loved in that county. I mean, people just, look at that. That's a lot of people. And you know, look, coming to her funeral. Check that. Maybe I shouldn't get rid of this right now. Maybe I should wait. Wow. That's a lot. That is a lot of people who came to her service. And so I came home and I made this, and then I bound it. And then I also remember buying rosemary, or I grew rosemary. And I remember from Hamlet, rosemary, the herb rosemary was for remembrance. And so I had everybody take a piece of rosemary home to remember my mother by. And I remember one of her brothers, he was from Goodlettsville, Tennessee, and he was a wild one. And he looked at me and he said, "Can we smoke it?" It was not. And so anyway, we sent her off with a good funeral there. But pardon me, all that to say, I don't want this to go to a landfill or to a thrift store or to somebody else's house. My goodness, somebody else could have bought that. A person could have been hired to come in and taken some of these things to resell. And I can't even imagine that. So no. So this is mine to maybe show to my children, maybe not. But I will eventually burn this, because that's going to be best to do. The next thing that I would like to show you in this pile of things, and I'm not going to go too deep with this because it's personal effects, but for instance, this picture of my little brother and I. He's 23 months younger than me, this wedding picture. Cameron didn't want it. I have multiple copies of this picture, and 31 years ago when my parents bought it, they were proud of this, and it sat in their living room until now, and they were proud of their two babies together in this picture when one was getting married. But I have multiple copies of it. I don't need another copy of this picture of my brother and I. And again, he didn't want it, and he doesn't have any children. So this picture will probably be incinerated also. And I know that sounds crazy to say, but I don't want this in somebody else's possession. This belongs to me. And if my children want a copy of it, I have copies of this exact same picture up at my house. So I think that's the best thing. And then here's another little something that I never even knew my mother put together. And this is why I said she's such an overcomer. She, again, did not graduate high school, and had for a long time a very tough life. Even after she got married, you know, I won't go into all of that, but she overcame a lot. And she eventually became a buyer for a big company in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, and worked for them for 17 years. And because of her position with that company, she got to travel all over, and she got to go to New York City and Chicago as a buyer for this company, and got to meet so many interesting people. And because of that, she has a wonderful memory of all of that. And she created a little scrapbook for herself. And most of the photos in here aren't of her. Some of them are, but most of them aren't. It's of these events and then the people who were part of these events. And Emmett Kelly, you all may know who that is. He was a clown painter. He painted paintings of clowns. And actually, that is, I don't know if Emmett Kelly was an actual clown or he just, but it doesn't matter. I just don't know. Maybe some of y'all know. But here is a man dressed up like a clown, and that's my mama at an event. And she put on these big events. And so this was very special. And again, this was, or here's Charming Tales. Maybe some of y'all know about Charming Tales. I remember her having some of those little figurines. I'm not sure if they still make them or not, but lots of pictures of her talking and Charming Tales from events that she had there and it's just a great little scrapbook that she put together. And I will probably keep this for a little while because it is endearing, and I didn't even know that she put it together. And she did all of this after I was married, because I think the first one in here was from, I don't know the first date, but I did see a date in here that said 1999. So I was already gone and out of the house, and so she wanted to commemorate some of the things that she did, and I never saw this. I never ever saw this. And so kind of hate that she didn't feel like she could share that with me, but she never was one to ever brag, ever. But seeing this was so sweet. So again, this is another thing that I want to keep in my possession to do with what I will. Oh my goodness. Okay, so let me show you a couple of other interesting pieces here. There is just so much, my friends, and I'm going to try to get through all this without coughing. I'm not going to get through all of this. This would take 2 hours and 2 days to upload because it would take so long. Now we're going to move on to my father for just a little bit here. I didn't know that this existed anymore. So this is going to be really a treasure for me. And I think I told y'all about taking multiple reel-to-reel tapes and having them digitized of my father's voice a couple of years ago. Or was it last year? I don't remember now. But anyway, this is another DJ convention that he did, disc jockey convention. He would go often to Nashville and interview people. And so I don't even know who he's interviewed or what's even on here. But there is, inside of this is also a magnet. And sometimes when these would be destroyed, he would break them apart and bring the magnets home to my brother and I. So my brother and I have always had a fascination with magnets because of my father. But there is a place in town who digitizes these, so I'm going to take this. But this is what the treasure is for me. And this says The Buffalo by Daryl Lynn. There's a really neat story to this. Some of you might know where Buffalo, Tennessee is. I'm pretty sure at the Buffalo exit off of I-40 is the exit you take to go down to Loretta Lynn's Dude Ranch to go to Hurricane Mills, Tennessee, where the Dude Ranch and the mill and her home is. So a long time ago, there was a restaurant sitting there and it burned down. But it is right off the exit there, and they had a big stuffed buffalo inside the restaurant. And I remember being a tiny little girl, like 5 years old, and you could go in to that restaurant and the buffalo was standing there and it had a vacuum in it. And so you could put like chewing gum wrappers underneath the buffalo's mouth and it would suck it into its mouth. There's no telling what they found inside of that. I don't know why they even had that. But the buffalo would talk to you. Well, the buffalo's voice was my daddy's voice because, again, he was a radio announcer. So I cannot wait to take this and have it digitized to listen to it. And yesterday during our Sunday dinner, as I was showing this to my children, my boys were saying, oh, I would give a lot of money to have that buffalo in my house and have Papa's voice on there, you know, talking and then sucking up chewing gum wrappers or whatever you put in front of his nose. So that's going to be quite interesting. That area of Tennessee is known for its wildlife. And so there's buffalo, and then there's also an exit called Bucksnort. And so if you're a hunter and or you're from Tennessee and you know those names, it's a beautiful, beautiful area of Tennessee. So I can't wait to have that digitized. So I've got to make sure I take it out of this building because I don't want it to get exposed to too much heat. Next, all right, let's go here next. Okay. I'm going to tell y'all this, and I'm almost embarrassed to tell you this, but after a while, you have so much fatigue when you're doing this kind of work, especially if it's for your own family. And we were doing so much that I knew I couldn't take it all. I couldn't keep it all. I didn't want to keep it all. But I wound up throwing away some of these things. I gave more of them away than I threw away, thank heavens, because my brother said, you know what, we should probably just take them to a place instead. So I'm glad that we stopped and we took them to, it's at the Knox Area Rescue Ministries in Sevierville. I probably shouldn't even say that to y'all, but anyway, I told the lady as I was giving them to her, I said, do y'all have somebody who resells? And she said, yes. And I said, well, you might want to put this box aside because it was a Rubbermaid tub full of these. This is a Fortune magazine, and this one is from May 1938, and it said $10 a year, $1 a copy or $10 a year. And I don't know who illustrated well, it says Linden. I don't know if that's the illustrator or not for that, but it says Italian line. That's a Lido crossing. Let's see. This is a little bit hard. It says Helen McConnell must be returned. Keep 74. I don't know, maybe somebody let somebody else borrow it, but it has some, oh my goodness. You can see some of the illustrations in here. This is difficult to show and hold up at the same time, but again, 1938. This is nearly 100 years old. And I don't know what I just dropped out of there, but there are some articles. There's lots of articles. There are lots of beautiful illustrations. A.O. Smith Corporation. A.O. Smith Corporation. Isn't that something that is in business right now? It seems like, is that a water heater company? Seems like I remember seeing something like that. And then this little thing that fell out here, it says that evening sun. And then, oh, it's a supplement to this, because it also says Helen McConnell in here. So there's that. I brought back way too many of those. You can see the stack of those that I have there. Behind it is, let me get a stack of Harper's Monthly magazines. This says 1871, so there's a stack of those right back there. Then, this is so interesting. This is a salesman's case. So it says, put these down, it's a wherever case. And it says the Aluminum Cooking Utensil Company, New Kensington, Pennsylvania. And it has some pictures of kitchens, and I guess those are their headquarters in here. And what I'm assuming is this was a salesman's case in which he came to people's homes and maybe sold people some wherever cooking utensils. I'm not entirely sure. It was stuck in the back of my father's garage, and he never told me about it, but I've been gone, or I got married a long time ago, 31 years ago. So, you know, he's picked up a lot of things during that time that I was gone too and wasn't in his home. Let's see, let me show you just a few more things that I think that you'll find interesting. I'm not gonna leaf through this. This is interesting though, because this says Japan, 1943. So, and it says December 1943. Let's see, the job before us approaches to Tokyo. So this is all about World War II in here. And this has Cruzan rum. And so this is my father's handwriting. I'm sure he put that Post-it note there to remind him what was in it, because I'm sure he had thoughts of selling the magazines, but he just never did. And now this is interesting. You can see the pages are different colors. Like, look at that, and I think every one of them are like this. Do you see the color differentiation there? It's light, dark, and then light, and all of them seem to have that. I guess maybe it's because the center, well, there are a lot of ads in there. Maybe these center pages, they do seem to be the articles. So that must be what that is. That's a lot of advertising. So yeah, the Japanese predicament. Too few ships, men, machines, too much empire, but Japan still hopes to win. So, yeah, that's really interesting. They have an ad for Rolex watches in there. Lots and lots of interesting information. I'm going to show you this right quick. There is a set of encyclopedias that my parents had in their home. I believe they bought them in 1981. So, and my brother and I referenced them often, and they were this pretty red leather with the gold. I remember that gold used to be really shiny as a kid all around it. And my son, our oldest son, Nate, when he and our middle son, Wesley, and I went on a home tour about a month ago in Charlotte, we went into a home and it had all these beautiful books on display, and there was a set of encyclopedias, and Nate had said, oh, I want those. I want a set of encyclopedias for my home someday in my fancy library. And I said, well, I know where I can get you some. And so I brought all of those home for him, and I will put those in my house somewhere so that someday when he has a large home, he can, or a fancy library anyway, he can put those in there. And then, let's see, I'm going to show you this too. This is interesting. This is from, let's see, Sunday, August 27th, 1939. This is the Knoxville Journal. And I haven't looked through this yet at all, but Chris said that his own father would really, my husband said his father would really enjoy looking through this because he grew up in Knoxville. And he, let's see, my father-in-law would have been only 3 years old when this newspaper came out. So he was born in 36. So yeah, this is Hope Grows Dimmer for Peace of Europe. Wow. Wow. Lots of good history in that right there. So I brought that home with me to probably give or sell to someone. This is something, it says Free Press, JFK Murder Solved. And I opened it up, and it's from 1978. It's a whole big publication about, wow, that might be interesting for a JFK buff. Then, I'm just going to show you the front of this because these aren't my people, and I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with this. My father bought a car years ago. I mean, like 10, maybe 12 years ago. And this was in the trunk of the car. And it's an old scrapbook. And it says U.S. Marines on it. But it has a bunch of, like, newspaper clippings and letters, and lots of pictures, and this looks like a poem that somebody either copied or wrote. Wow, that paper is so thin. And it says things to see and do, and there's just a lot of newspaper clippings, and again, lots of photographs. And I brought it home because I'd like to try to get in touch with the person that the family members that it belonged to, but I don't know. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with that. Then, let's see, I think this will be the last thing that I show you because we're going on an hour here. This was really interesting to me, too. I found, oh, let me show you this real quick, too. My father always liked to collect old bottles, and so I found a lot of these, and this, one of them says acid on it. Yeah, acid line, and then Ed Paris. I don't know what that is. And then this one is Listerine. But I thought that these would make really pretty flower bottles to put our flowers in that we grow. So I'm gonna clean these out really good and then use those for flowers. A lot of things that I brought home, I had my daughter in mind, but I don't want to burden her with this stuff because it can be too much and overwhelming. In these 3 Ziplocs are so many letters, and there's several of them to a Buchanan, but then there are some to the Shannons and to the Pages, and one of them is a returned check to J.N. Page, and J.N. Page was my 3rd great-grandfather, and then the Shannons were Jane Crockett and I'm gonna forget my 5th great-grandfather's name, but they were my 5th great-grandparents, and so I believe a lot of this is probably family, but I thought that this was so cute. This is a bunch of old Valentines, and some of them are written on and some are not. These, of course, are not, I don't think these are from my family at all because they're in those sleeves, and that means that they were sold somewhere, so that's probably not the case. But I thought that these 2 were so cute. This one has a little baby crying, and he's got a pin right here where his diaper is, and it says, "I want my mama," and it says to have a happy Mother's Day. And it says Jeanette and Ronnie. Jeanette and Ronnie. I just wonder, I need to find out because my mother did have a cousin Jeanette. No, it's not. Never mind. It says Booth 101. So my father must have picked this up from somewhere. So never mind about that. I was thinking it could be something from a family member. Thought this was so cute. I may have to give this to my husband on our anniversary. It says love, but it says to my wife, so never mind. Love and kisses to my wife on our anniversary. I'm glad you're you and I'm glad I'm me. Because this union suits just perfectly. And it says Pete on there, but it's got these old timers. I thought that was so cute. And then we had so much fun last night for our Sunday dinner because we were going through all of these and reading aloud some of these letters and trying to decipher their handwriting. This one was particularly interesting. It is not someone in my family, I don't think. It says to Jim, and it signed Millard as ever, Millard, but it says U.S. Naval Station, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, April 27th, 1953. And it has an interesting tale to tell on there. I'm not going to read it because part of it was disturbing. So we're not gonna, this isn't the kind of channel for that. And then this one here says Mr. Paul Shannon, Hurricane Mills, Tennessee, and it's dated September 1923, and it's from the Citizens Bank of Waverly. And my parents had an account at Citizens National Bank, I believe is what it was called. But again, this says Dr. Paul Shannon, and I believe he was a family member from somewhere down the line, maybe a great uncle. But what was interesting is these are his return checks, and he had written one to J.N. Page, and J.N. Page, again, was my 3rd great-grandfather, and he did own a store there in the Hurricane Mills community. But I want you to see this too. It says the Citizens Bank of Waverly, and this is a bank statement, a depositor statement. And again, it says September 10th, 1923, and it has all of his checks and then his deposits and his balance on here. But someone had to type all that out. A computer didn't print that off. That was typed out, and you can see that looks like it was perforated, that maybe they made notes in one column and then also made notes over here, and it looks like it was perforated so they could peel it out and then send it on to the person that was getting back those returned checks. I found some things in here that belonged to my great grandmother, Ida Bell Page. Her address is on here somewhere, and I'll have to see if I can find it, but she lived in the area called the Nations in Nashville. If y'all are familiar with downtown Nashville or the outskirts of Nashville, the area called the Nations, that's where she lived, and she lived on Tennessee Avenue. And her little house is gone now, but, oh, here's one. Miss Ida Bell, well, she was a Mayberry after she married my great-grandfather. And 5213 Tennessee Avenue, Nashville, 9, Tennessee. So I wonder if anybody else lives at 5213 Tennessee Avenue right now. And this came from Laura Baker, and she lived on Route 2, Box 18, Turner, Oregon. So I don't know who Laura Baker was to my great-grandmother, but isn't that something that she sent her a card. I'll show you this pretty little card that she sent to her. It's a birthday card. And it says, "Love and blessings, Laura." Laura Baker. My great-grandmother didn't have any sisters named Laura. So it must have just been a friend, or maybe a pen pal, or maybe even a neighbor, because at this time, I believe this is from the 50s, and my grandmother had already been married, my great-grandmother, so that could be what it's from too. And then, let's see, I think we'll end on this note here. This is another container of a lot of old letters. Girl will be Asferoti, New York. Girl will be Asfeodity. I don't know what that word is, but it is a good long letter, and it's from Mama Evelyn A. Salvadori, and her mama wrote it to her. Wow, her mama wrote this letter to her on July 28th, 1928. And it talks about a boxing match. It says, "Dear Evelyn, I and Bill went to the Bluffs last night, boxing night, and Gio won only 5 rounds and knocked the other fellow down on his face twice. At first he tried to knock Gio out. The first thing, Gio got mad and just made a dive and knocked him flat." Oh my goodness. And it says, "Love, Mama." It says, "I wrote 5 sheets too many and will write some more now about Gio. I haven't written to her for 3 weeks or more. Do the girls still recognize my writing?" So I'm not sure who these people are, but they aren't related to me. But what I was going to say is my grandmother wasn't even born yet when this letter was written. She was born, she would have been born 3 months after that. But look at that beautiful little Valentine. If someone was a collector of ephemera, I think I said it right this time, they would love these things for little mother's birthday. And it says Mommy and Daddy. Isn't that sweet? And so I have quite a few of these, and I don't know who these people are. "So you're another year older, ha ha ha. Well, shut my mouth. I'm not getting any younger myself. P.S. I hope it's your best ever." And the little dog's mouth opens and shuts. So there's lots of old cards like that in here too. I didn't want to throw those away because I have been making those little junk journals, And so I thought that that might be fun to use some of that stuff to make junk journals out of. There are lots of other things I could show you, but we are going on 1 hour now. I'm going to show you one last thing, and then we're going to hang it up here. Two things. All right. I have a Rolling Stone magazine. I'm not sure if that's not it is my father's. Wow. He used to take the Rolling Stone. It used to be a very different magazine, but it says, wow, I remember this, D. Mayberry, Box 311, Waverly, Tennessee. And this was July 22nd, 1982. And it has A Star is Born, so that's E.T. I'll probably keep that because I remember going to see E.T. and it does have my father's name on that. This was indeed his. And then this is a Beatles magazine. All about the Beatles here. So if you're a lover of the Beatles, you would adore that. And guys, I could keep on going. I mean, there is a box full of stuff. Somebody was an Elvis lover, and so a tribute to Elvis, long live the songs of the king. And this was my father's license plate, but this is kind of neat because FMWVRY, WPHC was one of the radio stations that he worked with, and then WVRY, I believe this was also in Waverly too. WPHC, WVR, it was, because that looks like Waverly. Those call letters look like WAVERLY. So I guess he had those on the front of his car at one time. But wow, we've had a marathon here, haven't we? One last thing, that chest back there also came from his house. It was in his computer room, and that's where a lot of these old things were stored, old letters and things like that. And I brought that back home because I can use that down in the farmhouse too here, my Airbnb. So I'll use that and I'll clean it up really good and put it down there. So it'll be a good piece to have, and to, you know, I'm just grateful to have it in the home. But all right, my friends, I hope that was interesting to you. I realize that this is not a typical ASMR video whatsoever, because I'm not speaking in a soft-spoken voice, but please know that, you know, a lot of times you tell me that what I say is comforting to you. This was comforting to me. So turnabout is fair play, right? So I appreciate you allowing me to do this and letting me go through some of these things with you. And yeah, one thing that I've learned from this process is I need to get up there to my house, and I don't plan on dying for a long time, but we never know. But my house is profoundly full of even more things than my father's house was. And I don't want my children to be burdened with that task. I also don't want to live without my little memories either, because I'd hate to part with those things. But it would be good to pare down some of my stuff, some of my own memorabilia. So it's going to be an interesting year, that is for sure, because I think that that's what I'm going to start doing, is doing a big declutter and a big pare down of my things that I really don't need all that much of. But thank you for listening to me and watching this, and please know that I do appreciate y'all so much, and I will see you on the next video. Bye for now.